This is Power Hour with Gabriella Power.
Hello and welcome to Power Hour. I'm Gabriella Power. Thank you for your company. We have a massive show coming up, so much to get into as Donald Trump issues a warning to Russia a day after Ukraine agrees to a ceasefire. And there's a bombshell report that has dropped that USAID officials have been instructing staff members to destroy documents. Yes, destroy them. What are they trying to hide? And Democrats, they are under fire for backing an arrested pro-Hamas activist. But first, let's check in on the mainstream media. Because as we've seen this week, Donald Trump is rightfully cracking down on the violent attacks on Tesla. Ever since Elon Musk has been working with Donald Trump and leading Doge, cutting waste and abuse, yes, God forbid, because the millions in DEI projects overseas and millions sent to terror organisations should not be stopped. But since Doge has been getting to work, which was promised during the election, the attacks on Tesla cars, the dealerships and charging stations have been getting out of control. They've been vandalised, cars have been set alight. Now, Donald Trump isn't going to sit back and let this happen in his country. He's made it clear that people carrying out these violent attacks, they're domestic terrorists. But hosts from MSNBC, they have an issue with that. Apparently, they don't have a problem with violence being used against American companies. Here they are trying to downplay the issue, defending the violence as protests.
Overnight have this post claiming that protests at Tesla dealerships are illegal. He said today he would label violence against dealerships domestic terrorism. Now, you know I am judicious in how I play this sound, but I think you need to hear it from him.
Mr. President talks about some of the violence that's been going on around the country at dealerships. Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists.
I will do that. I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company. Let me tell you, you do it to Tesla and you do it to any company, we're going to catch you and you're going to go through hell.
So just to be clear, you protest a private company, you are labeled by this administration a domestic terrorist.
So is it because it's Elon Musk's company that's being targeted? They're now standing up for the, quote, protesters. What would they like to see more of? Violence against American companies? But it's not just MSNBC. Left-wing independent outlets are straight up encouraging violent attacks on Tesla. This post on Cheek Media celebrates that Tesla stock prices have dropped dramatically and so has Elon Musk's net worth. And it says boycotts and protests work. Just to read that last part again, protests work. Look, I've got no issue with peaceful protests on really any issue, but that's not what we've been seeing here, and it is fake news to suggest that it is. We've been seeing violence, vandalism, and cars and charging stations being torched. And celebrating and encouraging this is sick. Instead of celebrating violence, maybe look at some of the results that Doge is delivering, because right now Elon Musk is cutting waste, fraud and abuse and trying to stop the country from going bankrupt. Founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, summed this up perfectly. Only Trump could make liberals hate electric cars. Joining us now is Senior Editor-at-Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer. Josh, so good to speak with you. I want to start out with the latest developments at USAID because these reports are wild. A senior official at USAID has reportedly instructed the agency's remaining staff to convene at the agency's now former headquarters in Washington for an all-day group effort to destroy documents, including many which contain sensitive information. Now, the materials earmarked for destruction include contents of the agency's classified, safes and personnel documents at the Ronald Reagan Building. That's according to an email sent by USAID's acting executive director, Erica Carr, and obtained by Politico. Now, the email didn't provide any reason for the document destruction, but I can't believe this. What are they trying to hide?
Well, Gabriella, I have no idea, but I know that we should know. I know that there should be investigations into this, both within the administration and from Congress and the relevant congressional committees that are responsible for having oversight over USAID. I mean, this is one of the sketchiest stories that I have seen in years. I mean, this is just utterly wild, frankly, borderline preposterous stuff. I mean, the USAID is having roughly 80% of its staff cut. So, I mean, I guess the people there are basically like literally in burn it all down, shred it all down mode. But I have no idea exactly what they're trying to hide. I mean, there's probably some sort of gross venality. I mean, probably some sort of cronyism, some nepotism, some giving of contracts to potentially terrorist organizations. I mean, I'm really just speculating here. I don't have the goods here. I don't have the receipts, but I know that this is the kind of thing that the American people really ought to know. You know, if Donald Trump's drain the swamp platform means anything at all, surely it means figuring out why bureaucrats in agencies that frankly should not exist are literally burning documents down. So Congress should be on this literally tomorrow. If they're not on it already there, we should have the House Oversight Committee getting to ground zero of this, the administration itself, Secretary of State Rubio, Attorney General Pam Bondi, whoever has to act should act, because this is extraordinarily sketchy stuff. American people deserve to figure out what the heck is going on.
And we already have some of the receipts from USAID, some of the waste, millions spent on DEI in Serbia, millions spent on DEI musicals in Ireland, and then, you know, the tens of thousands on trans comic books in Peru. So much waste. Now we're seeing documents being destroyed. A very interesting development. Marco Rubio confirmed, as you mentioned, that after a 6-week review, more than 80% of USAID programs have been cancelled. 83%, in fact. He said that the 5,200 contracts that are now cancelled spent tens of billions of dollars in ways that did not serve, and in some cases even harmed, the core national interests of the United States. And he said that in consultation with Congress, we intend for the remaining 18% of the programs we are keeping to be administered more effectively under the State Department. Thank you to DOJ, our hardworking team, for achieving this historic reform. But it's such a significant reduction. I suppose it really highlights just the amount of waste in this agency.
So USAID is a creature of the Cold War. It was created during the John F. Kennedy presidential administration in the early 1960s. I mean, picture the Cuban Missile Crisis, the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, the notion that the United States and Soviet Union, two massive nuclear powers, would not try to destroy each other there. So it was done kind of at a time when the Americans and the Soviets were competing on the global geopolitical chessboard in kind of a soft power competition, kind of a soft information operation global game, basically. And in that context, USAID maybe made some sense. I mean, maybe it made some sense to try to get bang for your buck when it comes to trying to export American influence into Southeast Asia or to Eastern Europe or Northern Africa, various parts of the world that perhaps were at prey of falling under the Soviet sphere of influence, frankly, right here in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, as well as evidenced by Cuba. But whatever purpose USAID may have had there, surely at this point, 36 years, frankly, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, at this point, USAID has outlived its usefulness. It's also an unconstitutional agency, by the way. USAID was constituted as a purported, quote unquote, independent agency, which the geniuses at the time thought meant that it could operate outside of the hierarchy, outside of the bureaucracy of Article 2 of our Constitution, which establishes the presidency. That's actually not how it works. The Constitution here in America is very clear. There is one man who wields the executive power. That is the President of the United States. If there is any body, any agency that purports itself, that holds itself out to be outside of the chain of command such that it is not accountable to the President of the United States, that is unconstitutional. And in fact, the Supreme Court is probably going to have a clear and direct ability to weigh on this sooner rather than later. It'll be one of many high-profile legal hearings that the Supreme Court of the United States will hear based on the early conduct of the administration and, frankly, the early conduct of the leftist outside NGOs that are engaged in lawfare right now against the administration. But one thing I know for sure, Gabrielle, is that this agency is just a profligate waste of Americans' hard-earned taxpayer dollars, and I salute Elon Musk and Doge for trying to send them the way of the dodo bird. Absolutely.
Look, I want to speak to you about the Democrats. They've called, or some of them have called, for the release of an alleged pro-Hamas activist arrested by ICE. The Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats posted an image on X with the caption, "Free Mahmoud Khalil." Now, they posted that to X. Now, Mahmoud Khalil was a graduate student and at the centre of anti-Israel protests that turned so disgustingly violent and ugly at Columbia University last year. He's acted as a spokesperson for this anti-Israel pro-Hamas student group at Columbia University called Columbia University Apartheid Divest, or CUAD. And to give you a sense of what CUAD is like, it says that it's fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. It believes that October 7 was a moral, military and political victory, and declared that October 7, well, they justified October 7 saying that violence is the only path forward. Anyway, it's disgusting to even read this out loud. But now anti-Israel activists who want to support this person, they're taking to the streets in protest. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has made it clear that his department would be revoking the visas and all green cards of Hamas supporters in America so they can be deported. Here he is.
Come to the United States as a visitor, which is what a visa is, which is how this individual entered this country, as on a visitor's visa. Okay, you are here as a visitor. We can deny you that visa. We can deny you that if you tell us when you apply, hi, I'm trying to get into the United States on a student visa. I am a big supporter of Hamas, a murderous, barbaric group that kidnaps children, that rapes teenage girls, that takes hostages, that allows them to die in captivity, that returns more bodies than live hostages. If you tell us that you are in favor of a group like this, and if you tell us when you apply for your visa, and by the way, I intend to come to your country as a student and rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities. I intend to shut down your universities. If you told us all these things when you applied for a visa, we would deny your visa. I hope we would. If you actually end up doing that, once you're in this country on such a visa, we will revoke it. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card as a result of that visa while you're here in those activities, we're going to kick you out.
Marco Rubio making a lot of sense there. Is it disappointing to see the way some Democrats are behaving, wanting to keep alleged pro-Hamas supporters in America?
Well, Gabrielle, first of all, Marco Rubio is entirely correct on the actual law. So there is a statute here called the Immigration and Nationality Act that goes back to the 1950s, which has a very clear provision in it that says that if you are a supporter of a foreign terrorist organization, then you cannot get a visa. And as it turns out, if it's revealed after the fact that you lied and said that you are not a supporter, you check the box no, but it actually is yes, then your visa can be revoked automatically. Frankly, actually, I don't even think you need the Immigration Nationality Act. I mean, the very notion that any non-citizen has a right to stay in the United States or in any sovereign country for the matter, that kind of just defeats the entire purpose of what it means to be a sovereign entity. If there is one right that is implicit in the entire notion of sovereignty, it's the right to exclude, to kick people out. That's what makes you sovereign in the first place there. And that's been American constitutional law forever there. But when it comes to the Democrats there, unfortunately, Gabriella, I am wholly unsurprised. I mean, I continue, on the one hand, I'm just continually just bemused and perplexed by the heroes that they choose out, people like this absolute degenerate, really just loathsome individual there. But I mean, Democrats really just have no low at this point, Gabrielle. I mean, it seems like every time you think they can't go lower, they fight. Just last week at Donald Trump's joint presidential address to Congress, they couldn't be bothered to get off their rear end to cheer for Peyton McNabb, the biological female who had a traumatic brain injury because a biological male cosplaying as a quote unquote transgender woman slams a ball into her face. They couldn't get off their butts to cheer for the family of Laken Riley. I mean, every time you think they can't go low, they somehow find a way to go lower and lower. But ultimately, the fact that they are choosing Mahmoud Khalil, and by the way, Mahmoud Khalil apparently has 19 lawyers currently representing him because all of these left-wing law firms here in America are trotting out the pro bono work for these attorneys. Find one J6er, one January 6th person who was wrongfully charged, who had more than one or two attorneys, let alone 19 there. So it's a total just complete mismatch there. But ultimately, it speaks to a broader societal and moral rot. And Gabrielle, I have my first book coming out this Tuesday, Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation, The Destiny of the West, available for pre-order now. And I talk about this in chapter 1 of the book, actually, how these uprisings, these uproars of anti-Jewish sentiment, anti-Semitism, it's never about the Jews. It's never been about the Jews going back to literally ancient Egypt with Pharaoh in the Bible. It's never about the Jews. It's always about the decline of a society. And that's what's actually going on here tragically in America and all throughout the Western world here. The Jews are always the canary in the coal mine. In this case, it's happening at Columbia University and on other Ivy League campuses, but it's not about the Jews. Unfortunately, it's about a broader societal moral rot. God willing, we'll recover our sense of purpose and values sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and we're really seeing that play out. I think people who haven't woken up to it are starting to realise that that is what is happening. Your book, Israel and Civilization, it's certainly being launched at a critical time. How are you feeling about it?
Gabrielle, I'm really excited. This is my first book. I poured my whole heart and soul into it, and I think it came out really well, if I don't say so myself. I'm really pleased with it here. It's talking about in this book, the state of Israel is in there, and U.S.-Israel relations. I make a very hard-headed, realist, MAGA, America First style case for the importance of U.S.-Israel relations, which basically boils down to the following. I basically say that America's #1 geopolitical threat this century is China. If you want to free up resources to focus on China, you should hand off the baton to regional allies who share your interests in a given part of the world. That's Israel and the Middle East there. But really kind of this broader point that I was just talking about kind of is a leitmotif that weaves its way all throughout this book. The book essentially, Gabrielle, is basically calling for Jews and Christians alike to fall in love with the Bible again, because I argue that there are 3 forces ultimately that are seeking to subjugate and overturn all that today we call, quote unquote, Western civilization. Those forces are wokeism, Islamism, and global neoliberalism. The lattermost being Davos, Brussels, United Nations, all these transnational global institutions. They're all waging a war on Western civilization one way or the other. The question is, are we going to gird ourselves? Are we going to ground ourselves in the actual values that our entire civilization was founded upon in order to launch a counteroffensive against these 3 forces? To me, that's going to require some sort of biblical reawakening there. So I really kind of walk through the English common law, the American founding there. I really show how all of this was predicated upon the biblical principles and, frankly, the political philosophy of the Hebrew scriptures above all. So it's all in there. Again, the book is called Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation, and the Destiny of the West, available this Tuesday.
Congratulations, Josh. I'm very much looking forward to reading it. As such an important topic, as coming at such an important time. I have 2 more US issues I have to get to before I let you go. I want to talk about President Trump's approval rating. It's actually dropped. I suppose this was inevitable. He was on such a high for months, and now we are starting to see this shift. So Trump's overall job approval rating currently stands at 45%, so it hasn't dropped significantly. But we have also seen, I suppose, this week, US stocks plunge. Wall Street had its worst day of the year on Monday, with the S&P 500 index falling 2.7%, and Bitcoin has also stumbled. What do you make of all of this? I suppose is the market, I should say, reacting to uncertainty? Is Trump doing too much too fast? Was this inevitable, and we're just kind of seeing a period of adjustment?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I mean, everything you said seems correct to me. So Donald Trump was starting in a very high place. His approval rating right out of the gate there in the first month or so was higher than it literally had ever been in his entire first term. So he was already starting on a higher level. And, some sort of correction to the mean was probably bound to happen. Unfortunately, Americans are not a particularly optimistic lot these days when it comes to our country. So we tend to have a more negative than positive view of our elected officials as a general rule. The fact that Donald Trump was actually above water for as long as he was says more about the popularity of his policies and how desperate the American people were to change from the failed policies of the Biden-Harris administration. So it was bound to be some sort of correction to the mean there. Now, the stock market obviously has been in pretty rough shape here for the past few days or so. Maybe that's reaction to some of the tariffs and the trade war. Maybe it's due to other factors there. Is Donald Trump overplaying his hand when it comes to tariffs? Maybe. I mean, look, if I were advising him, I would say, let's cool down a little bit when it comes to a country like Canada. I'm not entirely sure that I see necessarily the overwhelming American national interest in antagonizing our friendly northerly neighbors, especially at a time, frankly, where the Tories, the Conservative Party in Canada, was looking like they were going to win an election this summer. So I'm not entirely sure exactly what's going on there. But, these things ultimately, Gabriella, have a way of sorting themselves out. I will say that in general, I am more sympathetic to tariffs than most of the mainstream commentators here in the United States. Look, are they economically efficient as a general rule? No. but they have other useful functions. I mean, Gabrielle, I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest of the United States. I have spent many nights in old Rust Belt towns that have literally been destroyed due to globalism, due to manufacturing supply chains literally shipped out and lost to China. It is important that a country like America not merely seek to minimize prices when it comes to global free trade neoliberalism. It actually is important that we actually make some concrete goods there, that we actually be self-reliant when it comes to everything from pharmaceuticals to semiconductors and the chips that go into our computer and iPhone. So the idea of tariffs, I'm actually deeply sympathetic to. I wholeheartedly support them when it comes to countries like China. You know, I would probably encourage him to use more of a scalpel rather than a cudgel when it comes to a country like Canada. But reasonable minds may vary on this. But overall, I'm pretty bullish still about the direction of the economy, and this is a short-term dip that I think will have a tendency to self-correct.
And on the economy, Trump's first inflation report card is in, and it is better than expected, reversing 4 months of rising inflation. Let's take a look at the CNN analysis.
We have some good news on the economy and really the number one issue for many Americans, the cost of living. So we just learned that consumer prices in February increased by 2.8% year over year, 0.2% month over month. Both of these figures were a step in the right direction, and both were better than expected. So this is definitely very encouraging to see, because it's going to, I think, relieve some fears that inflation was perhaps re-accelerating, because this actually breaks a streak of 4 straight months where I think you could see it on the chart all the way to the right, where the inflation rate was going in the wrong direction, right? It was going higher and higher. Finally, we're seeing it dip.
I always love watching analysis on CNN when it is a positive news for Donald Trump. We have to leave it there. We are just out of time. Senior Editor at Large at Newsweek, Josh Hammer, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle.
Joining us now is comedian and commentator Alex Stein. Alex, it is great to see you. I want to start off with a bit of a laugh. Rosie O'Donnell has fled the country after Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office, and she says she's now living in Ireland and is in the process of applying for Irish citizenship.
Moved here on January 15th, and it's been pretty wonderful, I have to say. Never someone who thought I would move to another country. That's what I decided would be the best for myself and my 12-year-old child. I miss my other kids. I miss my friends. I miss many things about life there at home. And I'm trying to find a home here in this beautiful country. And when, it is safe for all citizens to have equal rights there in America, that's when we will consider coming back.
I actually want to give Rosie O'Donnell some credit here, because she actually left America. A lot of celebrities claim that they would flee the country if Donald Trump got in again, but she actually did it. Now, we have heard from the president about this. This is what he had to say.
Why in the world would you let Rosie O'Donnell move to Ireland? I think she's going to lower your happppiness level.
That's true. Thank you. I like that question.
Mr. Prime Minister, are you expecting?
Do you know who she is?
Yeah.
I'm joking.
You better off not knowing.
President Trump.
Donald Trump, he does not miss. Alex, what do you make of it all?
To be honest, I don't like Rosie's politics, but she looks like she's lost some weight. I mean, she doesn't look great. I don't want to say that she looks technically great, but she does look a little better. I know that she was making all those viral videos when she was last in America, and she had some sores, and she wasn't looking great. So, I just wish Rosie O'Donnell, a very famous woman that does have a history with Donald Trump, I wish that these people would just, check their ego for 1 second. And if she would just try to be friends with Donald Trump, I guarantee you, and I don't want to speak for President Trump, I guarantee you Trump could mend the fences with Rosie O'Donnell. But she wants to take it as a personal attack that he became the president of the United States, because Rosie O'Donnell is a constant victim. Even though she's a multimillionaire, very successful woman, she always has to play a victim.
Yeah, there's a few of those, aren't there? I want to speak to you about the tariffs. There's been plenty of controversy around Trump's tariffs here in Australia. We're at this stage going to be impacted on them with the steel and aluminium. And of course, they're not really seen as a good thing, but it's interesting to watch this play out. Ontario's Premier backed down in the trade war. He said that he was temporarily suspending his planned 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the US after Howard Lutnick agreed to renew trade talks. And of course, his decision came after the president threatened to double tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminium. What's your reaction to all this? How are people in America feeling about the trade war?
You know, a lot of people in America are kind of confused because we're getting multiple different stories from multiple different media outlets. People are saying that our economy is going to crash. But every time that Trump puts one of these tariffs or threatens to do one of these tariffs, all of these other countries immediately just stop doing whatever they're doing to be adversarial to our country. So Donald Trump is winning by just threatening these tariffs. So I love that he's doing it. But I also love the fact that we've been giving away money left and right to other countries. You see what Elon Musk is doing with Doge. Like, we've wasted so much money on not even helping other countries, basically just wasting it. So yes, this is a much better thing that's happening. And honestly, like I said, I don't want Australia to be victims. I don't want you guys to go to the grocery store and be affected by the tariffs that Donald Trump is putting in place. But I do feel like we cannot have a country that is getting taken advantage of constantly when it comes to our geopolitical relations. So I think what we're doing is something we need to do a long time ago and put America first and try to make a system where we can benefit and other countries can benefit. So we are mutually benefiting from our trade with one another. It's not that hard of a concept. There should be two winners instead of one winner and one loser when it comes to our international trades.
Well, it's an issue that's being brought up in the White House. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt shut down an Associated Press reporter over the issue. Let's take a look.
When President Trump last addressed the BRT when he was on the campaign trail, his big push was on tax cuts. He's going there today as he's proposing tax hikes in the form of tariffs.
Not true.
And I'm curious
he's not doing
why
that.
He's prioritizing that over the tax cuts.
He's actually not implementing tax hikes. Tariffs are a tax hike on foreign countries that, again, have been ripping us off. Tariffs are a tax cut for the American people, and the president is a staunch advocate of tax cuts.
I'm sorry, have you ever paid a tariff? Because I have.
They
don't get charged on foreign companies. They get charged on the importers.
And ultimately, when we have fair and balanced trade, which the American people have not seen in decades, as I said at the beginning, revenues will stay here, wages will go up, and our country will be made wealthy again. And I think it's insulting that you are trying to test my knowledge of economics and the decisions that this president has made. I'm now regret giving a question to the Associated Press.
She is so strong. I've had several exchanges with politicians in press conferences, and I understand they can get very heated, but Caroline Leavitt is proving to be such a boss in this situation, and just there's such a massive difference between Caroline and the previous one, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Oh my gosh, Karine Jean-Pierre. You know, honestly, we did give her a lot of hate. She did an okay job considering that the president that she was representing was a literal potato. So now we know the facts that Joe Biden was basically senile. So I'll give her a little bit of credit, but Caroline Leavitt is just night and day difference. It's so much better. She goes up there and she commands the room. She's not just using a binder and scripted answers for everything. She's actually speaking extemporaneously because she's smart. And that's the difference, is that we have people that are not afraid to speak out against these journalists like the Associated Press that are trying to attack them about their knowledge on tariffs. And listen, they're not in there to have an economics lesson. They're in there to find out what decisions Donald Trump is making to help our country. But they sit there and they want to try to, instead of being journalists, they want to be activists. And that's the big problem when it comes to the media in America.
Yeah, Caroline Leavitt handled it so brilliantly. She's an amazing woman, 27-year-old mother. I also want to speak to you about what's going on in America, or out of space, really. 2 astronauts who have been stuck in space for 8 months will be making their way back down to Earth. Thank you, Elon Musk. A SpaceX Falcon rocket will lift off, headed for the International Space Station, where the pair have been stationed since June. And this all occurred when the Boeing Starliner capsule suffered leaks during their trip trip, which was supposed to be just 10 days. And of course, we have heard from Elon Musk claiming that really it was the Biden administration that refused to let this rescue go ahead due to political reasons, Alex.
I know, isn't that so ridiculous? You have some of the top scientists, astronauts that are stuck in space. And because Donald Trump and Elon Musk are aligned ideologically, they're going to let two astronauts literally starve in space. I believe that these astronauts, when they get back, that they're going to have to go into quarantine for months because their body is so affected from being in space for so long. So this is what it's all about. You know, this is a clear indication that our politicians aren't about serving the people. They're not about advancing scientific knowledge or advancing interplanetary travel. They don't care about any of that. They would literally let these astronauts die if they thought that would help them politically. So that's where we're at, is that there's people that are stuck somewhere, and now we have somebody that wants to save their lives, and they're doing it, you know, a day late, $1 short, in my opinion. Obviously, I hope they come back safely, but this is ridiculous that we're even talking about this. They went on a 10-day mission, and now they've been up there for months. That just shows you how incompetent our government is. And, I hate to, criticize the space program, but it's pretty bad that we're having this much trouble getting them back. You would think that we'd figured it out by now.
Unbelievable. I know, absolutely right. It's hard to even fathom that someone can be stuck up there for that amount of time, but thankfully they are returning. I also want to talk to you about the controversial issue of biological men in women's sports. It was interesting hearing Gavin Newsom, California's governor, come out for the first time saying that it's actually unfair. I want to get your reaction as to why he's saying that now. He had plenty of time to say it over the past several years. But the Trump administration has paused federal funding to Maine universities for failing to ban biological men in women's sports, is certainly in defiance of the president's executive orders. It's great to see that Trump is taking even more action, but why does he even have to do this?
Well, because we are so insane that we have Supreme Court justices like Ketanji Brown Jackson that can't even describe or articulate what a woman is. But forget about the fairness, because obviously that if you're a biological male and you transition, you're going to have a physical advantage against a biological female. But forget about the fairness. This is a safety issue. We've had a trans volleyball player that was literally hurting people with the way that they were spiking the ball. So this is a safety issue. We need to protect women in sports. They shouldn't have to compete against a man. And I'm so happy that we have a president in Donald Trump that is actually doing something to stop this and helping women. And that's what I noticed too, Gabriella. I was recently at a women's march for International Women's Day. And you know who was leading that march? It was transgenders. It was a bunch of transgender women. I couldn't believe that's where women, need to get their guidance from at a women's march, is from a few transgenders that have gender dysphoria. So, if you're an adult, you want to be transgender, that's great, but you shouldn't get the opportunity in high school to compete against biological females. It just doesn't make sense.
No. And finally, we are getting some common sense from Gavin Newsom, but now he's getting backlash from it from the LGBTQI plus community. So we'll see how other Democrats, whether they're going to come on board with his position as well, or if they're going to keep trying to be as woke as possible. But Alex, there's been a big case that you are involved in. You filed a federal civil rights lawsuit in 2022 against Dallas County Commissioner John Price, Dallas County Judge Clay Jenkins, and a trio of county marshals after you were removed, essentially kicked out from a meeting from the Dallas County Commissioner's Court. We have that vision of you getting thrown out. Let's take a look.
Faces, professors, ex-boyfriends.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to admonish members of this court.
Yeah, I'm just asking. I would like to get some clarification. On here it says, but just what I'm saying, this is talking about a panty raise.
You are not.
I'm not admonishing.
You're not allowed to attack members of this court.
I'm not attacking them.
Yes, you are.
I'm asking a simple question.
Now, what's your question?
I'm asking what is your question? What was the panty raid about? My question is, he was arrested for a panty.
You're attacking members of the court.
You're finished.
You're finished.
I'm not allowed to ask about his criminal record.
Move on.
I'm not allowed to ask about his criminal record.
You're finished. You're finished. Okay.
Wow, so you were essentially kicked out for seeking clarification about allegations about Jenkins, who was running for re-election at the time. So you've been arguing that this really violates your free speech as well as the court's own rules. Has a verdict been handed down?
Gabriella, I'm sick to say this. We just got back from federal court today, and because they are elected officials, they have a thing that is called qualified immunity. So now, even though they did admit that they kicked me out and that they didn't even follow the rules, that an elected official is granted a little bit of leeway when they do make a mistake, and that we had to prove that they intentionally limited my free speech because of my viewpoint, which is obvious because he's a liberal candidate and I'm conservative. So they ruled not in my favor, but we have already filed our appeal. So now we're going to take it up to the 5th Court Circuit. So the journey still goes on. It's been a 3-year journey, and all they have to do is let me speak for 3 minutes. I've sued a lot of other jurisdictions. I've sued New York in one. I've sued Plano, Texas in one. And, you know, the county judge, they do not want to let me win. So sadly, on a technicality, they did win this one, but we're appealing that. So stay tuned. My fight for free speech is not just for me. It's for other Americans that should have the ability to go and publicly criticize officials and bring up any sort of, you know, skeletons in their closet and be able to say that in a meeting. And that's what they limited me from doing. They didn't want me to bring up the rumors, not rumors, the arrest for trespassing in a woman's dorm. It's a long story, very complicated, but at the end of the day, they didn't like my viewpoint. They limited my ability to speak, and we're still fighting it. So the fight goes on.
Well done for fighting it, and it's already been a long road, and you're going to keep fighting. And is that why it's not just about this case? You're really fighting for free speech here.
Well, 100%, because like I said, I'm not trying to virtue signal. I'm not doing this for you. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care if you're liberal. We should be able to go and criticize our elected officials, and they shouldn't have this thing called qualified immunity where they can just kick you out and say, oopsie poopsie, I did it on a mistake. So we need to hold our elected officials accountable, and we need to make our elected officials realize that they are voted on and they are elected to work for us, and not the other way around. They're not meant to go to these meetings and work against us and limit our ability to speak freely. So sadly, the First Amendment did take a loss today, but the fight goes on. We're going to take it up to a higher court, and we are definitely eligible for the appeal. So just stay tuned. The journey, sadly, I thought I was going to get some closure today, but it looks like the fight must go on.
Well, appreciate you giving us the update. Keep fighting, Alex Stein. It's so good to speak with you. Thanks for joining us on Power Hour.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys always having me on.
US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Russia as the ball is now in its court over whether it agrees on a ceasefire with Ukraine. Joining us now is Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, Peter Jennings. Peter Jennings, thank you for joining us. Look, as we know, Ukraine has accepted a 30-day proposal for an immediate ceasefire in the more than 3-year-long conflict after talks in Saudi Arabia. Now, Donald Trump has delivered this message to Putin. Let's take a listen.
There are things you could do that wouldn't be pleasant in a financial sense. I can do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia. It would be devastating for Russia, but I don't want to do that because I want to see peace. And we're getting close to maybe getting something done. We've got Ukraine done, and as you know, I've always said that Ukraine might have been the more difficult party. You were here a week ago when some interesting things happened. I had somebody that didn't seem to want peace. Now he's agreed to peace. So we'll see what happens.
What's your assessment? What can we really expect from Russia?
Well, we're at the business end of these negotiations now. It surprises me a bit that there's not been a more detailed set of discussions with Russia already. Trump's had a few conversations with Putin, but here we're going to get to the brass tacks, if you like. And I think we have to wait and see. Russia has been very aggressively pursuing its military campaign right up until now. And so the first thing to look for will be, will they accept that ceasefire deal? And then I think we're in for some pretty tough negotiations over land, over territory, and over security guarantees. That they will be the key things.
Absolutely. And Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is heading to Moscow for talks on the ceasefire, difficult conversations. And as you mentioned, there are some key issues we really need to discuss, possibly not at this point in time, but down the track. How much will Ukraine have to give up?
So at the moment, Russia occupies approximately 20% of Ukrainian territory. And the Russian position that's been put publicly is they want to keep all of that. Ukraine also has a pocket of land which they militarily occupied inside Russia near Kursk. So that's what's up, I guess, for negotiation. The Ukrainians clearly don't want to give up an inch of territory, but I think practically they understand that might be the price for peace.
Yeah.
And I think we have to see now, is Russia going to be content with that, or are they going to try and position to take more? I don't anticipate that this is going to be easy. I think, in spite of President Trump's bluster, this is actually going to be really hard for two countries that have been fighting each other incredibly hard for actually over a decade now. So these are going to be some tough talks.
What options are there if Russia does not agree to the ceasefire?
Well, as Trump has said, he does have options to make sanctions harder on Russia. He could talk to China to try and make China pressure Russia. China has really become the backer of Moscow's war. And we've all seen the pressure that Trump has been prepared to put on to Zelensky. So America has military power and economic power. That's the two levers that it contains. Frankly, I think Putin should be thanking his lucky stars that in President Trump he's found someone who's prepared to treat him somewhat as an ally, because the Russians have been bleeding very badly through this war. Putin's been forced to empty his jails in order to find manpower to send to the front. And, you know, it's a myth to think that the Russians are somehow on the verge of victory. They're not. So Trump has held out an olive branch to Putin, and if Putin has any sense, he'll accept it. I'm just not so sure that for a leader who engages in so much brinksmanship internationally as Putin does, that he will. So I'm pretty sceptical about where this is going to lead. I don't think we'll see quick solutions.
Does Donald Trump deserve credit for getting to this step, to getting Ukraine to agree to a ceasefire deal? No one's been able to do that up until this point. I suppose it's way too early to start celebrating it. But does he deserve credit that we are at least appearing to be closer to a path to peace?
I give Trump credit for achieving a remarkable thing, which is getting the European countries to spend more on defence. US presidents have been asking for that for decades. Only Trump has really been able to deliver it. I'm disappointed with the toughness that Trump has shown towards an ally. And we shouldn't forget that Ukraine was the country that was invaded. They're fighting for their survival. I think Trump could have handled that a little better, particularly not having that public fight with Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. But yes, he has advanced in his own fairly demanding and rough way an idea for peace talks, which no one has really been able to successfully prosecute. I think he should get some credit for that. And now we just have to see them stick with it, I think, to deliver an outcome that's just, that doesn't deliver victory to an aggressive authoritarian country, Russia, which provides some degree of security backing for Ukraine, which keeps its independence. They're the outcomes which I think we need to see.
After that fight, I suppose you could call it, between Zelensky and Donald Trump, it's been revealed that Trump does intend to invite Zelensky back for another meeting in the White House. And this comes just a fortnight after their big clash. Is it going to be awkward between the two? What do you expect from this meeting?
Well, another day, another press conference. The first thing I'll be looking to see is will the Vice President J.D. Vance be in the room, or will have Trump sent
I'm sure he will be.
Corner for?
No, I think they're very aligned.
And but no, I mean, the remarkable thing about Trump is that nothing that happened yesterday has to matter very much. I think having had that experience, having had the Ukrainians sort of recalibrate how they're going to approach the issue, this will be the meeting that both sides would have wanted a week ago. And that's a good thing, because I think I want to see the US and Ukraine get back to a more friendly and cooperative state. And if that's what we see, then that'll be a fine outcome.
Peter Jennings, Director of Strategic Analysis Australia, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Joining us now is David Carlucci, former New York State Senator and Democratic strategist. David Carlucci, great to see you again. It seems like we're now getting a clearer idea of who wants to be president in 2028 and which Democrat is really going for it. California Governor Gavin Newsom, he's certainly eyeing it off. He's launched his podcast, This is Gavin Newsom, and his first episode, he brought on conservative Charlie Kirk and straight up asked him for advice. Take a listen.
What do you do? Seriously, Charlie Kirk, give us some advice.
Get better ideas, Governor.
Is
like,
it
for
ideas?
example, I mean, like, if you want to, like, you have an opportunity to, like, run to the middle and seize this mantle. Obviously, you're talking to me of all people.
Yeah.
So, like, you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports, that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out and say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But, like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. It is an issue of fairness. So it's deeply unfair.
So for the first time there, we heard from Gavin Newsom that biological men in women's sports is unfair. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, I think it's great that Newsom is having these guests on from different opinions. And I think when we talk about these issues, we should debate both sides. And I think that's what's missing, particularly in American politics today, is that if you show any type of sympathy to another side of the story, that's somehow perceived as weakness. And this is a problem on the left as well as the right. And so I think with Newsom, who's obviously seen as a progressive liberal politician, to have these right-wing politicians and thought leaders on his show, I think is really a great step forward, and something that I hope more people will emulate that want to seek the presidency or any high-level position in the United States.
So what do you think? Do you agree with Gavin Newsom? It's unfair for biological men to be in women's sports?
Yeah, I think it should be pretty clear. We don't want biological men playing in female sports. It's a very small percentage of the population where that even exists. And I think, unfortunately,
why
it's been used as a
are you saying this now? Do you think you kind of missed an opportunity last year? If that's what you believe?
I think what's happened... No, I think what's happened is this is taken way out of context. I think that I support, like many Democrats, and hopefully some Republicans support trans people's rights to all types of things.
Yeah, of
and
course.
when you have something
but the specific issue is men in women's sports. So I don't understand how that's been taken out of context.
Well, it's been taken out of context in the idea that this is somehow a bread and butter issue, an issue that Americans are really focused on, that impacts their lives.
It absolutely does. It impacts females.
And that's what I'm saying. It affects your life when there's 5 people out of 500,000 that are playing sports on the college level, that impacts your life. I mean, I think that's just a disagreement. And I think it's something what does impact Americans' lives are many issues that I'd love to talk about tonight that really are in front and center. And we do have the opportunity to talk about and vote on. Instead, when things are going south for someone's political agenda, they want to bring up this red herring issue. And I think that's what it is. It's been a red herring.
It's interesting to see finally where you are getting some common sense from Democrats. And I will give Gavin Newsom some credit. I will give him some credit for having Charlie Kirk on the podcast and actually listening to the other side, because I believe that the Democrats need probably all the help they can get at the moment. Do you think that the Democrats were just too far left and that's why they had such a brutal result in the 2024 election? And are we going to see in the future them making their way closer to the centre, which we're starting to see with now we're being told for the first time that it is actually unfair for men to compete in women's sports?
Well, I think that this is something where most Democrats are in the middle. And what we've seen is, unfortunately, on the other side, the Republicans go way off the cliff. Right now, the reason why I say that is because if you talk to Democrats, there is a strategy, there is a plan in terms of what they stand for and believe in. When you talk to Republicans, there's nothing that they won't do if Donald Trump says to do it. And a perfect example is at the joint meeting of Congress, or the State of the Union, we'll refer to it as, they had Republicans just get up and clap on pieces of legislation that they voted for when Donald Trump was bashing it, like the CHIPS Act that had 24 Republican support, and they get up and clap like trained seals. They have to do whatever Donald Trump says. And that's unfortunate because he's doing a lot of things that he just did not campaign on. He talked about lowering the price of consumer goods, and instead what he's doing are inflationary measures that will increase those costs. And that's very unfortunate. And the biggest problem is just that we don't know what's next. It's totally erratic. The secretaries in his cabinet aren't sure what's going on. Members of Congress don't know what's going on. And that causes uncertainty that trickles down to the rest of the world with this trade war. And that uncertainty will lead, unfortunately, to a recession. And we can debate the merits in terms of these policy procedures. But one of the biggest problems is we just don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. And that causes this uncertainty and this problem. So, yes, I disagree with Donald Trump on many issues. But at least if you had that certainty that you can campaign on one thing and you follow through on that, that's something. But then having this unprovoked trade war with Australia, with Canada, the list goes on with our allies, just doesn't make sense. And we're scratching our head to say, why are you doing this when you said you would lower prices, not increase them?
Well, Trump's first inflation report is in. It is better than expected, and it is reversing 4 straight months of rising inflation under Biden. But you did bring up how the Republicans handled themselves while Trump was addressing Congress. You were criticizing them for applauding. What about the Democrats? So many of them did not clap their hands at really key critical moments when we heard from DJ Daniel, a cancer survivor, when Laken Riley was being honoured. Many of them sat there, frowns on their faces, couldn't even bring themselves to applaud at key moments like that. We have heard from Donald Trump, who has criticised the Democrats for this.
The Democrats have no clue. You saw that the other night during the speech. 2 young women were slaughtered by illegal aliens. 1 young man has very serious cancer and many other problems. When you look at the people up there, they all had difficulty, very serious difficulty. But when we're talking about 2 young girls, beautiful young girls, Laken Riley, you know the whole story. That evening was a disaster for the Democrats, in my opinion. And I would mention, and I'd see 2 mothers that were inconsolable as they stood, crying. Their daughters have been absolutely just destroyed, killed, viciously killed. And the young man who loves the police departments, he had cancer and has cancer, very bad cancer. There wasn't from people sitting there, Democrats, there wasn't a hand clap. Nobody stood. They were just stone-faced. These people are sick. There's something wrong with them. There was no standing for anybody. The only thing they liked is when they heard about the death taking place with Ukraine. They were happy about that.
Is it disappointing? Were you disappointed? Do you think the Democrats just really missed an opportunity to show some unity?
Well, yeah, I think it's a distraction. I want people to focus in on what Donald Trump is actually saying. I think that's the best strategy, to hear from his mouth that he's talking about the disturbance that we Americans are going to feel because of his actions. They need to listen closely. And I agree, this distraction, but this has gone on in American politics. And you didn't hear Donald Trump complaining about the Republicans that wouldn't stand for Joe Biden. But the bottom line here is that Donald Trump will always look for someone to blame. And it doesn't matter what the Democrats do, he's going to blame them. He got up there and talked about hypotheticals, that if he did all of these things, that Democrats still wouldn't stand for it. Well, respect and decency go 2 ways. In that speech, you had the president of the United States calling these elected Democrats lunatics. He said that. So I agree that it was not right for the Democrats to be disrespectful. And just like it's not right for Donald Trump to be disrespectful to other politicians. So I think we should all gather in and demand more from our politicians to treat both of these offices, whether it's Congress or the President of the United States, with the level of decency and respect that that office deserves. I think it does no one any service to have that type of that disrespect in any chamber. And I think most importantly, it's just a distraction from the real messages to say, what is going on here? And Donald Trump will spend his time blaming instead of actually talking about the policies that he's putting forth and what they're going to do.
David Carlucci, we have to leave it there. Really appreciate you joining me on Power Hour. Thank you for your time.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
That is Power Hour. Thank you for your company. We'll see you next week. Make sure you subscribe to Sky News Australia on YouTube.